He arrived as a revolutionary, but ruled like a king. Emmanuel Macron didn't just win France. He staged a hostile takeover. But his shock therapy ignited a firestorm. A nation pushed to the brink, forcing the Jupiterian king to face his people. Frustrated at home, he turned to the world with a grand Gaullist dream to break free from America and forge a new European superpower. The full story, a special ATM documentary. Watch now.
They report the chaos. We reveal the agenda.
Good evening, and welcome to ATM. For 50 years, French politics was a predictable dance between two dominant parties, the center-left Socialist Party and the center-right Republicans. This established order created a stable, albeit sometimes stagnant, political landscape where power regularly alternated between these two major forces, shaping the nation's policies and direction for half a century. Then, in 2017, a new figure arrived on the scene. A man with no established political party, no prior electoral history, and who emerged from entirely outside the traditional political system to unexpectedly seize the presidency. This individual was Emmanuel Macron, whose sudden ascent dramatically reshaped the future of French governance. His election was not merely a change in leadership. It was an event that fundamentally detonated the entire political landscape, shattering decades of established norms and expectations within French politics. Macron's victory signaled a profound shift, dismantling the traditional two-party system that had long defined the nation's political identity. But who exactly is Emmanuel Macron? Is he truly the revolutionary outsider he so convincingly claimed to be? A fresh face challenging the old guard? Or is he, in fact, the ultimate insider, an elite investment banker from Rothschild and Company, a product of France's rigid and exclusive establishment, who simply rebranded politics to save a dying system from within? This question lies at the heart of understanding his impact. Tonight, we will deep dive into the complex mind of the Jupiterian president, a leader who projects an image of being lofty and detached, thinking like a god, yet who must govern a nation that frequently finds itself on the brink of widespread revolt and social unrest. We will explore the strategies and philosophies that define his controversial presidency. Macron's rise to power was nothing short of a political masterstroke, a carefully orchestrated ascent that defied conventional expectations. Despite his image as an outsider, he was, in essence, the ultimate insider, a distinguished graduate of the elite École Nationale d'Administration, famously known as ENA, the prestigious institution responsible for producing France's ruling class and top civil servants. Before entering politics, he was a multi-millionaire investment banker, accumulating significant wealth and experience in the financial sector. However, he astutely recognized that the existing political system was fundamentally broken and failing its citizens. He observed that both the Socialist and Republican parties, which had dominated French politics for decades, were exhausted, deeply unpopular, and widely despised by the electorate, creating a vacuum for a new political force. Capitalizing on this widespread disillusionment, he launched En Marche, a groundbreaking political movement, deliberately designed not as a traditional party, but rather modeled with the dynamic, agile, and innovative spirit of a Silicon Valley startup. This approach allowed him to bypass established political structures and appeal directly to a broad base of voters seeking change. He strategically positioned himself as neither left nor right, advocating for a radical centrist approach that aimed to transcend traditional ideological divides. In the pivotal 2017 election, he achieved what many considered impossible. he successfully faced down the formidable far-right populist leader, Marine Le Pen, in the second round and emerged victorious, securing the presidency against significant odds. This victory, however, came only after both of France's traditional, long-standing parties were completely annihilated in the first round of the election, failing to even qualify for the runoff. Macron hadn't merely won an election. He had orchestrated a hostile takeover of the entire French political system, fundamentally reshaping its structure and dynamics in an unprecedented manner. Once in power, Macron wasted no time in establishing his authority. He immediately adopted a distinctive Jupiterian style of leadership, lofty, detached, and projecting an aura of supreme confidence, utterly convinced of his own destiny and the righteousness of his vision for France. This approach signaled a departure from more conventional, accessible political leadership. He swiftly initiated a shock doctrine of economic reform designed to liberalize the French economy and stimulate growth. One of his most controversial early moves was slashing the wealth tax, a decision that quickly earned him the widely publicized and often criticized nickname, President of the Rich, fueling public perception that his policies favored the wealthy elite. Furthermore, he directly confronted France's powerful and historically influential unions, pushing through controversial labor reforms by executive decree, bypassing parliamentary debate and public consensus. These reforms aimed to increase labor market flexibility, but were met with fierce resistance, highlighting his determination to implement his agenda despite significant opposition. Macron firmly believed that France's entrenched system required a profound shock to modernize and become more competitive. His approach was characterized by a perceived arrogance, a rapid pace of reform, and a growing unpopularity among significant segments of the population who felt alienated by his policies and leadership style. Despite the widespread discontent, his reforms were, in many respects, effective in achieving their stated goals. He had successfully awakened and invigorated the pro-business spirit within France, attracting foreign investment and pushing for economic liberalization that many economists argued was long overdue for the nation. However, in his pursuit of reform and modernization, he had also inadvertently awakened a dormant popular rage among the working class and rural populations. This deep-seated frustration was about to explode into a massive social movement that would nearly bring his presidency to an abrupt and dramatic end, challenging his authority like never before. Next, we will delve into Emmanuel Macron's near-death experience, the unprecedented and widespread Yellow Vests movement, exploring its origins, its impact, and how it fundamentally reshaped his presidency and the future of French politics. Macron's economic reforms, often described as shock therapy, had indeed yielded some positive results for the French economy. However, this progress came at a significant social cost, deeply alienating a large segment of the population. In late 2018, what began as a seemingly minor online protest against a proposed fuel tax increase rapidly escalated into a nationwide phenomenon, catching many by surprise. This initial spark ignited a much larger movement, demonstrating the underlying discontent simmering within French society. This burgeoning movement quickly adopted the moniker Gilets jaunes, or the Yellow Vests, named after the high-visibility safety vests worn by protesters. Crucially, this was not a traditional organized protest led by established trade unions or political parties. Instead, it was a largely leaderless, decentralized, and often deeply violent popular revolt. Its primary target was perceived as the president of the rich, Emmanuel Macron, who many felt was out of touch with the struggles of ordinary French citizens. For several months, France found itself in the grip of widespread chaos and unrest. The scale and intensity of these protests were unlike anything witnessed in decades, marking a profound period of social upheaval. These demonstrations were not confined to the capital, Paris. They erupted across the entire country, particularly gaining traction in the rural and suburban areas, often referred to as Forgotten France. These regions felt marginalized and overlooked by the central government, fueling their participation in the movement. A defining characteristic of the Yellow Vest movement was its lack of a single identifiable leader or a clear organizational structure, making traditional negotiations virtually impossible. This absence of a central figure meant that the movement's collective anger and frustration coalesced around a singular unifying target, Emmanuel Macron himself. Protesters viewed him as the embodiment of the elite and the architect of policies that they believed harmed the working class, making him the focal point of their discontent. At the zenith of the Yellow Vest crisis, President Macron's approval rating plummeted to a disastrous 23%, a stark indicator of his declining popularity and the public's widespread dissatisfaction. The president, who had once cultivated an image of a powerful, almost Jupiterian leader, now found himself metaphorically under siege within his own palace. The sheer scale of the protests, with over 3 million participants at its peak, and the billions of euros in economic damage incurred, underscored the severity of the situation and the profound challenge to his authority. The revolt had transcended its initial catalyst, the fuel tax, evolving into a much deeper expression of grievance. It became fundamentally about the dignity and respect of a working class that felt increasingly despised and ignored by an elite globalist president. This sentiment highlighted a profound societal divide, where many ordinary citizens felt disconnected from the political establishment and believed their concerns were not being adequately addressed by those in power. This period represented Macron's near-death experience politically, a moment of profound crisis that threatened to derail his presidency entirely. Faced with immense public pressure and widespread unrest, he was presented with two stark choices: either to forcefully suppress the burgeoning movement, risking further alienation and violence, or to genuinely engage and listen to the grievances of the people. In a surprising and strategic move, he chose the latter, opting to pivot his approach. In a remarkable display of political adaptation, Macron consciously abandoned his previously perceived Jupiterian top-down leadership style. He instead launched the ambitious Grand National Debate, a nationwide initiative designed to foster dialogue and address public concerns. For several months, he embarked on an extensive tour, traveling to numerous small towns and communities across France. During these visits, he engaged in marathon town hall debates, some of which lasted for over 6 hours, actively listening to the unfiltered anger, frustrations, and suggestions of the people directly. This strategic shift marked a stunning act of political adaptation, demonstrating Macron's capacity to respond to a crisis. Through the Grand National Debate, he made significant concessions to appease the protesters and address their core demands. These included the complete scrapping of the controversial fuel tax that had initially ignited the movement, and a commitment to raise the minimum wage, directly impacting the financial well-being of many working-class citizens. These policy changes were crucial in de-escalating the widespread unrest. Through this crisis, Macron not only managed to survive the political storm, but also demonstrated a remarkable capacity for learning and adaptation. He proved to be more than just a rigid technocrat, revealing himself as a ruthless political pragmatist, willing to fundamentally alter his public persona and approach to leadership. This strategic transformation was instrumental in saving his presidency, showcasing his ability to navigate severe political challenges by adjusting his entire personality and policy direction. However, the conciliatory and approachable new Macron proved to be a temporary facade. Following his successful re-election in 2022, his earlier, more unyielding and reform-driven side resurfaced with renewed vigor. His next major policy target was France's deeply cherished and politically sensitive pension system. This move signaled a return to his original reform agenda, setting the stage for another significant confrontation with the French populace. In 2023, Macron's government proposed a highly contentious reform, raising the official retirement age from 62 to 64. This proposal, touching upon a deeply ingrained social benefit, immediately ignited widespread public outrage and opposition. As a result, the country once again erupted in massive protests and strikes, mirroring the scale and intensity of the Yellow Vest movement, as millions took to the streets to voice their strong disapproval of the proposed changes. Despite facing millions of citizens protesting in the streets and lacking a clear majority in parliament to pass the pension reform through conventional means, Macron steadfastly refused to back down. In a highly controversial move, he invoked Article 49.3 of the French Constitution. This powerful constitutional mechanism allowed his government to force the pension reform bill into law without requiring a final vote in the National Assembly, effectively bypassing parliamentary opposition and public dissent. Macron had ultimately won the legislative battle over pension reform. But this victory came at a significant and enduring cost to his political capital and public image. He emerged from the conflict as a deeply unpopular president, presiding over a fractured nation. Despite this, he maintained grand ambitions for France's future, both domestically and internationally. Next, we will delve into how he channeled these ambitions onto the world stage, seeking to reassert France's influence globally amidst internal divisions. Frustrated at home, facing domestic challenges and unable to pass major reforms without significant political battles, Emmanuel Macron increasingly turned his attention to foreign policy. His focus shifted from internal struggles to the international stage, seeking to make his mark beyond France's borders. His true defining passion was never solely France. It was the broader European project. His grand ambition was to forge European strategic autonomy, envisioning a new superpower, decisively led by France, that possessed the capability to act independently of the United States on critical global matters. This vision aimed to elevate Europe's standing and influence. This ambitious vision is comprehensively encapsulated in Part 3, The Brain Death Prophecy, a concept that would profoundly challenge long-established alliances and fundamentally redefine Europe's crucial role on the global stage, pushing for a more self-reliant and assertive continent. Macron's vision first dramatically collided with geopolitical reality in 2019. In a shocking and widely publicized interview with The Economist, he controversially declared that NATO, the cornerstone of transatlantic security, was experiencing a state of brain death, a statement that sent ripples across the international community. He specifically cited a perceived lack of decisive U.S. leadership under President Trump and Turkey's unilateral military actions in Syria as key reasons for his assessment. His allies across Europe and beyond were understandably horrified and deeply concerned by such a stark and provocative declaration, questioning its implications for the alliance's future. Germany, a key European partner, swiftly condemned his drastic words, while the United States government publicly called his comments dangerous and unhelpful to alliance cohesion. Yet, for Macron, this was not an accidental misstep, but a deliberate and calculated provocation designed to achieve a specific strategic objective. He was intentionally trying to shock Europe out of what he perceived as its comfortable post-Cold War slumber, passionately arguing that the continent could no longer afford to outsource its security to the United States. He believed Europe needed to take greater responsibility for its own defense and strategic interests, rather than relying primarily on American protection. This perspective was deeply rooted in a Gaullist vision, echoing the historical precedent of Charles de Gaulle's 1966 withdrawal of France from NATO's integrated military command. It emphasized the critical importance of European independence and self-reliance in defense and foreign policy, a core tenet of French strategic thought. Driven by this profound belief in European strategic autonomy, Macron embarked on a controversial Russian gambit, attempting to construct a new security architecture for Europe that, remarkably, included Russia. This initiative aimed to foster a more stable relationship with Moscow, despite ongoing tensions. Then, in February 2022, Russia launched its full-scale invasion of Ukraine, fundamentally altering the geopolitical landscape. Macron's brain death prophecy regarding NATO seemed to have been disproven. Instead, the alliance found itself more united and reinvigorated than ever before in response to the aggression. Macron's initial attempts at mediation, including his widely publicized visit to Vladimir Putin at that famously long table in Moscow just before the invasion, were largely perceived as naive failures. These diplomatic efforts ultimately proved unsuccessful in deterring the conflict, leading to widespread criticism. However, Macron then executed a significant pivot in his foreign policy stance. Realizing that direct mediation with Russia was no longer viable, he transformed into one of Ukraine's most hawkish and vocal supporters, providing crucial military aid, including advanced Scalp long-range missiles, to bolster Ukraine's defense capabilities. In a dramatic move in 2024, he stunned the world by refusing to definitively rule out the possibility of sending Western ground troops to Ukraine. This represented a major escalation in rhetoric and policy, causing considerable alarm and terrifying many of his European allies, particularly Germany, which expressed strong reservations. For Macron, the ongoing Ukraine war is not a refutation of his theory, but rather its ultimate validation and truth. He skillfully uses the conflict as powerful leverage, arguing that with the potential return of a Trump 2.0 administration on the horizon, Europe must urgently accelerate its efforts to build its own robust and independent military capabilities. He is the primary driving force behind the ambitious Future Combat Air System, a monumental $100+ billion collaborative project with Germany and Spain, aimed at developing a cutting-edge sixth-generation fighter jet. This initiative is a cornerstone of his vision for European defense autonomy. He consistently pushes for the establishment of a strong European pillar within NATO, but crucially, one that possesses its own independent strategic brain and decision-making capabilities. This pillar would be capable of autonomous action, rather than merely being subservient to American leadership within the alliance structure. His overarching goal remains unequivocally clear: to strategically utilize the profound crisis in Ukraine as a catalyst to forge the independent, French-led European superpower he has consistently envisioned and championed throughout his political career. This is the culmination of his long-held strategic ambition for the continent. However, this grand and ambitious vision for Europe's role on the international stage is increasingly colliding with a harsh and complex political reality back home in France. Next, we will delve into the deep and intriguing paradox of the Jupiterian president, exploring the challenges he faces domestically. We have seen Macron the disruptor, Macron the pragmatist, and Macron the grand European strategist. His tenure has been marked by a series of bold moves on the international stage, aiming to redefine France's role in a shifting global landscape. But this brings us to the profound central paradox of his presidency as of October 2025. Despite his ambitious global vision, a stark contrast emerges when we examine his domestic standing and influence within France. The man who talks like the leader of a new superpower, who challenges Russia and America, who strides the world stage with confidence and authority, projecting an image of strength and unwavering resolve, faces a very different reality at home. This powerful international figure is, in essence, a lame duck king in his own country, grappling with significant internal challenges that undermine his authority and ability to govern effectively. When Macron won re-election in 2022, securing a second term, he also suffered a devastating and unexpected loss. He failed to win an absolute majority in Parliament, a critical blow to his legislative agenda. This single event crippled his domestic agenda, as he can no longer rule by decree, a power he previously wielded to push through reforms. The loss of a parliamentary majority fundamentally altered the dynamics of French governance. To pass any law, including the crucial annual budget, he must now beg, bargain, and battle with a fragmented and often hostile opposition, making legislative progress an arduous and frequently stalled process. The pension crisis, which sparked widespread protests and social unrest across France, was a direct and undeniable result of this inherent weakness in his parliamentary position, highlighting the fragility of his domestic power. Unable to secure a majority through traditional means, he was forced to resort to the controversial nuclear option of Article 49.3, bypassing parliamentary vote to enact the pension reforms, a move that further inflamed public anger. This action further cemented his image as an arrogant, anti-democratic monarch in the eyes of many citizens, and ironically, fueled the very extremist parties he claims to fight against, strengthening their narrative of a detached elite. The ultimate irony of Macron's presidency is that his strategy of occupying the radical center may have only hollowed out the moderate opposition, leaving him as the sole and increasingly vulnerable defense against the rising tide of the far right. And the far right is indeed winning. Marine Le Pen's national rally has never been more popular, consistently gaining ground and attracting a broader base of support across the country. They dominate the polls, consistently outperforming other parties, and have achieved significant victories in key European elections, demonstrating their growing political influence and electoral strength. Macron's entire political project was built on the premise of being the only man capable of defeating extremism, positioning himself as the bulwark against the far right and far left. Now, as his final term winds down, the prevailing consensus among political analysts is that he may have inadvertently created the perfect conditions for his nemesis, Marine Le Pen, or her successor, to finally take power in 2027, a scenario he desperately sought to prevent. So who is Emmanuel Macron? Is he a visionary who saw the future of Europe while others slept, pushing for greater integration and strategic autonomy on the global stage? Is he a brilliant pragmatist who skillfully navigated a popular revolt and maintained stability amidst unprecedented challenges? Or is he an arrogant president of the rich who shattered his nation's political center and inadvertently paved the way for extremism to flourish? The truth is, he is all of them, embodying a complex and often contradictory blend of these characteristics, making a simple categorization impossible. He is a leader of profound, almost tragic contradictions, a figure whose actions and ambitions are constantly at odds with the realities of his domestic political landscape. He is a man who dreams of leading a superpower, of shaping the geopolitical order, but struggles profoundly to lead his own parliament, facing constant gridlock and opposition at home. What do you think? Is Macron a visionary who will ultimately be vindicated by history, or a gambler whose high-stakes political maneuvers have jeopardized France's future? Let us know your thoughts and perspectives in the comments section below. If you found this documentary insightful and thought-provoking, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to ATM for more deep dives into the minds of those who shape our world and the complex political landscapes they navigate. His legacy will undoubtedly be debated for decades to come, analyzed by historians and political scientists seeking to understand the full impact of his transformative yet turbulent presidency. He dreamed of being a new de Gaulle, a towering figure who would restore France's grandeur, but he may ultimately be remembered as the man who, in his earnest attempts to save the political center, inadvertently lost it, leaving a more polarized nation in his wake. Thank you for joining me on ATM for this in-depth exploration of Emmanuel Macron's complex and paradoxical presidency. We appreciate your viewership and engagement.